Hi, everybody. Well, like Simon said, I'm Jean-Paul Varwijk. I live in the Netherlands, and I work for Rabobank International. And I'm maybe a bit overly relaxed because I just came from 3 weeks of touring the United States. So it's my second time in New York, and the last time was 3 weeks ago. What I'm going to talk about is how we implemented context-driven testing at Rabobank. But first, let me give you some background. As I said, I come from the Netherlands, and surprisingly, it's known for tulips, windmills, cheese, and also for testing books. The first time I went to Eurostar, there were 2 book presentations from Dutch companies, and I overheard an American attendee sigh, "Again, a book from the Netherlands? Don't they have anything else to do there? There are only 15 million people living there. Why do they write more books than we do in the United States?" And I've asked myself that question. I think the answer is that there are a lot of companies involved in hiring out testers. And they all want to make their mark to management. And they do that either by writing a white paper or do it a little bit more extensively by writing a book. And probably the best known book coming from the Netherlands is about TMap and TMap Next. It's actually been translated into French, German, Chinese, English, and South Afrikaans recently, I overheard. And they actually, through CDT, it's spread out to, I think, over 20 countries, including the United States. But where does this all come from? What do they actually tell in those books? Well, basically, a long time ago, Clamford Meyer wrote a book about software testing, Boris Beitzer wrote a book about software testing, and Barry Boehm had something with a curve of some kind. And most of these books actually reproduce that. They package it neatly into a management process. And given that these companies also supply certificates, and especially the TMap guys, and knowing that about 90% of the testers in Holland are actually certified, either RSTQB or TMap, and the other 10% are Agile testers who don't care about certification. So that's the background where I'm coming from. And more surprising is that the vast majority of testers actually never coded. So the discussion that we had earlier with Trish would be a non-discussion in the Netherlands. It would be a discussion of some kind, but for most testers it would be like, oh yeah, well, yeah, maybe I should learn to read code, but write code? Really? That's stuff developers do. That's not what I do testing. And that's probably due to also one of the other accomplishments that all these companies had, is that they actually made testing a profession. And it's an established profession. You can be a software tester and not have to be ashamed about it and not call it a software developer in test or anything else. You're a professional software tester. It even has a how do you call that, a kind of a trade union with, I think, currently 1,800 members called TestNet, who organize test conferences who are a full day for free, including meals, and that all for roughly $100 per year. So it's really a profession in the Netherlands. So it's really strange coming here and then every conference hearing people defending themselves that they are testers. Then the organization I work for. And I called it a large organization because 50,000 people work there. And then I added that picture to to make an example, and then I thought, well, okay, I'm looking out of the window. There's not such a huge building over here. So, but in the Netherlands, in Utrecht, where the head office is based, this is one of 4 large buildings there, and they kind of have an agreement that there's a cathedral that's about roughly 400 feet high. Nothing will be higher than that cathedral, which is kind of nice, and they keep it that way. Utrecht, by the way, is like 25 kilometers from Amsterdam, where there are a lot more bigger buildings. But then Rabobank. When I first started Rabobank, I started at a department called Rabobank Netherlands. And I now work for Rabobank International, so there's a slight difference. And at that time, they had actually developed something called START, which is the abbreviation for Structured Testing at Rabobank according to TMap. So they felt TMap, okay, that's nice, but we do it our way, as we do most things our way. And one of the things that included that was that for every step of the process identified in TMap, you had to write a document. So when I first started, I had to write test strategy reports and test plans and master test plans, test process reports every week and stuff like that. And even they got bored. So they reinvented themselves, and by the time that they actually started to make sense, they outsourced testing. Except the other large part that is part of Rabobank is Rabobank International. And I didn't feel like being outsourced, so I moved to Rabobank International and continued my testing profession there. And one of the things I had heard before coming there is that, yeah, if you're at Rabobank Netherlands, you're a real tester. What they do at Rabobank International is cowboy testing. That's not really testing. They just do stuff. And it immediately appealed to me. Nevertheless, once I was there, it was still pretty much process-based. But people were anxious to change. And over time, the following happened. We got management convinced that it was a good idea to have Michael Bolton give every tester at Rabobank International a rapid software testing course, including the people we hired. The only thing they would have to do is not write the hours. Seems like a fair deal. A few of the contractors didn't want to. Needless to say, we didn't rehire them. And as a follow-up, we even offered them a course in exploratory testing. Although that was not for all the testers, that was only for the internals who had to train the other testers. Which basically was a real major step in the right direction, in my opinion. And we got some serious discussion with the management about context-driven testing and how to apply that. And what you did see is that they got interested. They took the bait. They wanted to know more about it. And the testers got interested. Although, if you look at it, I would identify 4 groups of testers. The one group is the group of testers who just worked at Rabobank because they needed work. So they came strictly 9 to 5 and went home and didn't care about testing whatsoever other than during the office hours. Then there was the group that was interested in testing, even outside the office hours, but could not really commit. They kind of, it's my job, so I should know more about it, but I'm certified, so I'm doing my job reasonably well, I get good grades, and I get a pay rise every now and then, so I'm okay with that. And then there was the 2 groups who were more fanatical. The one group was the group that actually believed in TMap and ISTQB as the way to go. And they were kind of, what's that new guy talking about? Context-driven testing and exploratory and all that stuff. And they were kind of opposed. They would argue every every meeting about it. And they were trying to convince management. And the bad thing is actually management is easily convinced with process-based testing because that fits their picture. And the fourth group were, well, guys like me, or Huib's coach, who was then a manager at Rabobank. And we wanted to get stuff going, get change. But change goes slowly. At first, we had a group of testers who got enthusiastic. We had testing dojos. We would go and sit in a room, order pizza, and go and test stuff. And just watch what happens, and then talk about it. And then talk about how to improve that, and how to do session-based testing, why exploratory testing is different than what they usually did. Usually it always started with a bug hunt. You give a tester an application and a computer, and they start looking for bugs. And working at a bank, that's not really the way that the bank likes you to do that, because that doesn't leave a sufficient paper trail, because we have to be auditable. So we try to teach them how to do that differently and still be creative and not write test cases up front. And that worked. But on average, we would do that every 4 weeks, 20 people turned up, and we had 180 testers. And of those 20, 15 or so would be the same people. So eventually we asked them, well, maybe it's not such a good idea that you come again, we like to have other people. And we started to promote that. And we're still doing that, but the groups are just as small as they ever were. And it's less frequent, even with free pizza. So somehow it didn't catch on. Probably the biggest reason was it's after work. And then we kind of convinced management, what if we can start at 4 o'clock? So that's 1 to 1.5 hours during work and 1.5, 2 hours after work. And yes, more people showed up. But that only lasted for a couple of sessions also. So somehow it didn't catch on, just like we would have wanted to. Another approach we had was to give them workshops and tutorials. A couple of people that work for Rabobank are regular speakers, so we asked them, maybe you could come and do tutorials at our bank for our group. And that got more crowds going. Roughly 60, 70 people, which was basically a nice result. And they got interested. But still, it didn't really change things. So there was another change going on at the same time, and that was we were becoming agile. So the idea that we had was maybe we should piggyback that, because Agile was making everybody feel insecure in a way. Doing Agile in a large organization means that it still needs to be regulated in some way, so they thought about first doing RUP. That was really too much overhead. Then they downsized that to open up, which is actually basically the same, but leaving out heaps of documentation, and eventually into Scrum. But Scrum has this side effect. People feel insecure about their role anymore, because we're all now a team. And they're really stuck to their job titles and the salary scale that came with that. And, well, does that really mean that we actually do have to do different things now? Or it's just cutting up the same in 4 to 6 week iterations, right? No, not quite. So we tried to introduce the concept of concurrent testing as a go-between. Concurrent testing basically is, instead of having the business asking for a problem to be solved, then have have an architect and a business analyst write about it, then have the developer develop, and the tester test, that everything starts concurrently, and everything, in every step of the way, the tester is involved and has influence in how it's shaped and formed and how the content comes to bear. And that works. We went into every management community, the project managers, the line managers, the managers for the business analysts and everybody, and we talked about that. And during those sessions, they actually said, well, that's a good idea. We like the way that you explain concurrent testing, let's do that. And having the managers on board, we thought, yes, now we're making progress. And then we found out managers paid us lip service. Basically, what they said, it's a good idea, you can implement it, you have our permission. Doesn't mean that we actively support this. You have to convince everybody else. Anybody else in our team, you will have to convince. Even if they're in your project team, doesn't necessarily mean that they will have to follow what you're asking for. So we took it a step further. We had, across all business lines, we have a lateral test management meeting. We started to change the procedures and processes themselves. We wrote a new test policy, which basically stated that there is no policy. It kind of tells you what you have to do so that you're still auditable and understandable. And for instance, one of the things that we concluded was, yes, you need to have a test plan because that's what audit regulations actually requires, but it doesn't say anything about the shape or form it has to be in. So if it's a mind map, a PowerPoint, or a document, that's fine by us. And that went for test reports and everything in between as well. The only thing that kind of mixed in was that there are still other conventions. Still, we started to convince the non-testers of doing context-driven testing, which was a great idea. They bought it, and we were happy about it. But then came the backfire. This is a large organization. Only about 2,500 people or so are actively involved in IT. Most of them are not testers. And we're a bank, and we have, well, let's say that financial seas are not very calm the last decade. And even Rabobank had their fair share of trouble. So higher management who have no interest whatsoever in IT as such, let alone testing, actually had their own ideas. So we have now like a quick count, because I didn't rehearse the number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different change processes in place for the coming, say, 2 to 10 years. And basically that means, well, yeah, it's a great idea to have context-driven testing and changing the policy and having good ideas about it and everybody enthusiastic, but you know, everything around you is changing. And nothing will stop you from being creative more than the fear of making a mistake and being punished for it. Because if everything else around you is changing, people tend to hold on. They tend to resist change. And for me personally, that had kind of a downside. I switched business lines and realized that I was a member of the lateral test meeting group, that after having an argument with a new business line director who was also a member, that probably wasn't such a good idea to recommit myself. But that brought down the number of context-driven testers in that lateral test management meeting to 2, after Hype had already left the company. So our influence was dwindling. We're kind of losing ground. There are so many changes facing the employees that they trying to grasp every buoy that they can get. And the number of people that actually shout out, well, but we're going in that direction. Why are we not doing it now is low. It's maybe, we still have roughly, I think now currently we have like 250 testers employed. So we were growing. But the number of context-driven testers that actually say that they're context-driven is maybe 15. And there's maybe 50 people who say, yeah, it's a good idea. But. And the others are kind of indifferent. They do follow the change because the policy changed. They do like the idea of not having that heavy of a documentation and processing anymore. But everything around it, development, business analysis, project management in particular, it's a great idea, but what's in it for me? And I don't see a real benefit. Let's keep it at something that testers do and not change the rest of the organization. And that makes it really hard. And the stupidest thing is that a lot of our customers actually bought in. But then project management rebranded that as, yeah, that's the consequence of doing Agile. Not that our benefits were not now portrayed as being Agile, because Agile is something the project managers have as their objective. And not as something that's particularly on testing. So it is really hard in a large organization if you, I can imagine if you're in a small team, you want to change something, you change it. If you are in a large organization, you're also in a small team, but your team is just part of the larger organization. So you can change your team, but if you have changed that, that doesn't mean that everybody else buys in what you have changed. The rest of the organization is either unaware of what you have changed, are not interested, or if they are interested, it's not beneficial for them. It's not what they are graded on. They have to meet their objectives. Customers, however, like the way we report about the software. So there still is a movement upwards to implement context-driven testing, but it's slowing down, and it's really, being a fan of it myself, it's, I'm like, why doesn't it go faster? Why doesn't everybody catch on? But thing is that if you really want to change an organization, you have to change the context. You can start by changing the individual, which we did, which we thought was the prudent course of action. And we managed to reach a lot of testers who were enthusiastic in the beginning, and they changed their ways. We actually had got to the level of changing the policy, but the rest of the organization was still just a bank in rough weather with new regulations and new audit rules popping up out of the bushes every month. So they were more concerned of, if you do exploratory testing, then you don't have test cases. But how do we know then that you actually tested? And what you tested? And that we actually could tell that in a report made them nervous, because that was something you did after a while. First, you had to have the product and test it, and then write about it. It's not something you had up front. And then we said, well, I can't predict how many bugs will be in there, so I can give you a specific detailed planning up front. Yeah, but I think our audit guys want that. And a lot of people actually didn't know what they wanted. They just, I think that they would want that. I remember a time, it was like 3.5 years ago, that I had a serious discussion with a customer, internal customer, about it. And he eventually said, I have my own business analyst from the business side, and he's going to send you a list of everything you have to comply to be auditable. And I said, okay. I thought, well, I can match that. And he sent me a list with 210 items that I had to comply to. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to do that. I don't want to do that. How do I meet that challenge? What I did was, okay, I'm going to get angry one weekend, actually report a 210, very briefly, which got a stack of, well, 32 pages, I think, of reporting. And I did a report that I would do myself, that was only 1 page. And then I went to the team manager of the audit group and asked him, oh, listen, business has asked me to report to you in this way. And I threw in the 32 pages. And he said, well, listen, man, I have like 20 or so projects like you every week. And I only have that many people. I'm never going to read that. And so what's in it? I said, well, what's in it is actually this. It's 1 page. Okay. Okay, give me that page. I'll discuss it in the next team meeting. I'll have it reviewed by 4 people, and I will let you know. Next week, I contacted him and I said, well, how did it go? He said, well, I first showed him the 1-page thing. We discussed about it. It has 3 or 4 items that need clarification, and it's missing 1. And that's it. And then I gave them the other report, in which 2 of the questions that we had were answered. But for the better part, we all found that disgusting. So I went back to my customer, and I said, well, this is what you asked for and did not get approved. This is what I thought that was necessary, and it's already now approved, and the audit part for testing is now done. Which do you prefer? Which was a nasty question. He didn't really like me about asking it in that way, but he said, well, he literally said, that's really nasty what you did, going over my head. But I like the swift result. And he had a kind of a mean streak as well, because he didn't tell the business analyst working on it that everything was done, so the business analyst kept nagging me for the next 2 weeks before we told him that we had actually already done it. So, point is that unless the surrounding of the organization actually changes with you and actually is ready for a new way of reporting, a new way of investigating, is willing to go that exploratory scientific approach of testing, and is ready to handle the information that you derive from that, maybe in a large organization, context-driven testing is something you should do, but not make part of the process itself. So, on an individual level, do learn, do practice, and do experience how context-driven testing works, and share what you find. Let everybody benefit of what context-driven testing adds to testing. But on organizational level, the organization still has to learn and has to connect to different kind of testing and has to accept it and value it. And it is really hard. And I still believe that we can make a change because you see I identified the 4 groups of testers before. Most of them are actually buying into parts of what we kind of preach, so to say, and change the way that they test. They're only the stubborn group that really believes in the certified testing approach now really wants upfront documentation and writes test cases. The others actually try to kind of follow the context-driven testers and see the benefits in spending time with them and actually understand that in an agile environment that actually really works really well. So my lesson actually is that you should strive to learn how to do that. I'm not saying that you need to be a context-driven tester per se, but actually you have to be a committed tester and try to learn and follow new ways to improve yourselves and enhance your skills and apply those to your workplace. But be aware that the organization you're in might have totally different ideas on what software development or testing specifically means. And it is a long road to convince people. Even if you think that you're already making steps forward, there are a lot of bigger issues going on in a large organization that might just throw you back to where you once started. And as an individual, you have grown, but as a role or profession within the organization, you might just be back where you were, even if you made significant changes in policies and stuff like that. So it's a bit sad ending, kind of, but I'm still enthusiastic about it, and I just wanted to share that it's not always a happy path. It's just, maybe it's a struggle sometimes. I think I have improved myself and a lot of testers with me in the way they test. And for some part, that has bear its fruits. We now have, for the second year in a row, a Rabobank annual test event. And one of the things that we did was that we had a competition on the registration module. That somebody else from another department wrote, was totally unaware that there would be a test event involved, and he just wrote a registration module that he uses throughout the company for events and special occasions with local branches and even branches here in California and that we have. And the competition was that find as many bugs that you can and write a good report about them. And I took literally a lot of pride in it that I came second, but the other top 5 were all context-driven testers. So, and about 60 people participated. So that was really like, yeah, people now actually saw that it worked. And the event itself is already something of an advance. But it's still only the testers. The rest of the organization is aware, likes it, or likes it not, but is basically, well, okay, no, good. Some of the other professions thought, well, if they have an event, we should have one also. But that's probably not the result that we aimed for. So to conclude, context-driven testing is, in my experience, if you are working in a large organization, something that you can do as an individual, maybe as a team, but beyond that, be aware that not everybody buys in. And that not everybody is actually interested in the way that you do testing, is only interested in the outcome. I do still have managers a few levels up who only say, has everything passed? And if I tell them, what do you mean? I don't have test cases? They freak. So that's my story for now.
Testing, testing, 1, 2. It's working. Okay, before I will write down your numbers for the questions, if people on the webcast also have questions, please tweet them to AST_NEWS, other, that's said, AST_news. So people from the audience in the world, please tweet them and feel free to ask anything about the topic. Okay, people, green cards. Okay, I will move the mic now.
Hi, Jean-Paul. My name is Damien Frustrated Sinadinos. I really enjoyed your presentation, your story. I was really hoping for a happy ending, but that's not always the way it works out. I find myself in a very, very similar situation. I also work at a very large bank. Interestingly, I've got so many questions. I'll only ask one that maybe benefits the entire group, and maybe I can talk to you afterwards. But I'm also at a bank, actually in a position on paper, seems like it has authority to make changes. In reality, not so much. But one thing that stuck out to me is when you talked about context-driven testing, and you found out that some of your customers actually wanted it. You said, believe it or not, even though management was on the fence and some of the testers were apathetic or not interested, the customers actually wanted it. Who were your customers? I assume they're not folks walking into the branches. There's someone further down the food chain. And how did you and how did you discover that?
Yeah. Just as an explanation, Rabobank International does not necessarily deliver to our local branches, with a few exceptions. We have offices in 46 countries, I think. There's one here a few blocks away in New York. But we mainly service our internal customers. So like credit risk analysis and international cash management. And we have modules that go out into the branches that they use for their customers. And the people that are responsible for those parts, some of them are actually getting enthusiastic about the way we report stuff and we involve them. But it also makes them kind of nervous because they are actually used to having a detailed test plan and with test cases in it. So if we don't produce that up front, they kind of feel like, I like what you do, but are you doing it the right way? And that's troublesome sometimes. They buy into the results, but because what they see is that we deliver better software and faster. So that kind of convinces project managers, and by default, but as a follow-up, it also starts to convince line management. But the higher levels actually still don't really care or know, or we will talk. You're anxious.
Okay, next person, 160, he's in front of me.
Thank you very much. My name is Alex. I work for a not such a big organization. Our software development department is about 200 people as opposed to the 2,000 people that you guys have. My question is, how many testers do you have? How many people did you have to, how many testers did you have to try to get on board with this? And does the strategies that you use, do you think that applies equally well to smaller organizations? Is there a different strategy that you'd use for organizations that are not, maybe not so many people?
I think, like I said, we have roughly somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 people involved in IT, which is every kind of activity. Of those, around 250 are now testers. So it's roughly 10%. The way to get them on board is that about 50% of them are internals. That for internals, following the policy and following rapid software testing is mandatory. If that last part really works, I'm beginning to doubt sometimes, because I'd rather have them go to rapid software testing because they want to than that they have to. Nevertheless, almost everyone who follows it comes back with a different mindset. So is more open to change, at least. Following up on that change, however, is very hard if the environment doesn't support it. If you're in a team and you're the only one who's enthusiastic about a new approach and a new style of discussing software, it's hard, especially if they don't see the benefit. After a while, most teams will start to see the benefit, but you have to get over that hurdle first. And does that apply to a small team? I think that also applies to a small team. I think in a similar fashion. If you're in a small team, let's say you're in a Scrum team of 6, 7, 8 people, and you're the only designated, officially not designated, but tester, and you're enthusiastic about it, you still have to get the others on board. So that the personal challenge will probably be similar, but the backing will be different. You have a different context, basically, that might or might not support what you're actually doing. And my experience is, because I do a lot of talks and tours and stuff, that if you are in a small company that, say, 20, 25 people delivering software at a rapid pace, doing Agile, the whole backyard of procedures and processes doesn't exist. They're totally oblivious. I think one of the biggest examples was Hype and I did a tutorial on Agile Testing Days a few years ago about mind mapping. And we had this whole part about mind mapping for a master test plan and test strategy. And we had about 3/4 of the people in the room looking us over with glazed eyes and who had no idea what a master test plan was. So in Agile companies, I would imagine it would be different.
Okay, next question, 140.
Hi, I'm Jay. I work in a company that's probably 100 people in development, and that's test and developers and product managers and the whole thing. And my question to you is, where in your division is the person that you present the business case to prove that this works so that you get some management backing? Because without a mandate, without the authority.
I don't think there is actually a one person or one point in the division that would provide the real backing, because they're having thousands of people on board means that there are a lot of captains on a ship. So getting one of them will probably only influence it for some part. So I think we're getting there. I think the head of business for the part that I work for, most testers work for, is buying into it, but he still has to sell it to the other, his peers.
So you find your evangelists and you plant seeds one at a time.
Sorry?
You find your evangelists and you plant seeds one at a time.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up question on this? Number 54. I will hype.
And remember, that is the hype I was talking about.
Yeah,
And he has
being there in
inside knowledge.
being there in that organization, you triggered something. So you have to run back to her because I'm going to ask the question to her. what do you exactly mean by a business case? Because managers always want a business case for testing, and I don't think there is a business case for testing.
Can you hear me?
Testing, testing, 1, 2.
I can just yell. So my counter to that is that there is always a benefit to an organization. And your ability to put that benefit in a language that they can understand is what the business case is. I mean, I watched an organization go from waterfall to agile in a period of less than a year and evolve the process to a point where it worked really, really well. The defect, you could measure defect counts were reduced, customer complaints were reduced, and all that stuff. So if I were in that position, I would go and find somebody in the same industry, in the same sphere of influence that was doing what I wanted to do and say, look at the results they've got.
Sorry, Mr. Facilitator, can I react on that, please? Since it was my question. Sorry? Can I say something?
Yes.
Already do. Yeah, okay. Well, let me give you a little bit of information that probably Jean-Paul wasn't aware of because I was doing that stuff. In my business line, we didn't have a test automation at all. Long story, but no business case, blah-de, 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 blah. And I went up to the highest manager who was in charge of the whole budget for the whole freaking IT organization. And I asked him, what do you need to give me budget to do that? And I only need, well, let's say 100,000 euros or maybe 200,000. And he said, give me a business case. And I just laughed at him. And I said, really? I can't. I can't give you figures. Exactly. You mentioned what he's not in the room, but Keith did a talk on TestBash. Look it up. It's online somewhere. Keith Klein talked about how to talk about testing to C-level managers. And again, we step into the trap of business cases and trying to put that into money. And the thing is, it's not money. It's test automation or testing adds comfort, adds speed, adds more information, adds transparency to projects, not saving money and stuff like that.
I think one of the things that makes it difficult in larger organizations that the actual IT organization is a standing organization. It will have its cost anyhow. So the only thing that you can deliver, real thing that you can deliver in a business case is time, because cost is a relatively invariable.
And that I completely agree with you. And I've been through the test automation fight and the virtualization fight with companies that produce something that is sold in a black box. And the case was, I actually went home on a weekend and set up the infrastructure and ran 52 test cases and said, see, I just saved you a week of testing. And they went, yeah, okay, let's start doing that.
Okay, go for a follow-up question to Ben Simo.
So when people ask about business case of testing, I start thinking of, well, what's your business case for management? What's your business case for looking out the windshield as you drive your car to work each day? We want to see where we're going. We want to test what we're doing as we're going. And when it comes to automation or not, I find often those cases where people are trying to justify value and turn it into dollars are cases that, again, we can qualitatively assess them. You know, what's the business case for me to buy a car for the purpose of driving to my mailbox at the end of my driveway every day? That just doesn't make sense. I will get out and I will walk. If I have a 50-mile drive to work, I'm not going to walk just because it doesn't make sense. I will drive my car. And a lot of these automation or not, or test or not, questions to me are as silly as, do I need a car to drive to my mailbox? Or do I need to look out the windshield as I'm driving?
Ben, I think I have an answer you probably don't like. The one thing that I think, my personal belief, TMap and ISTQB do have is a, quote, management model that installs testing into an organization. So, because I think managers are susceptible to management models. They like to follow something and believe in that. And that's what they were good at. It's just that it was never really about testing. It was about selling the test process and the procedures. And maybe even more so their people. So there is an answer to that, but it's not one that we here think probably is the answer we like.
Can I comment? Am I allowed to do that? So I was interested in the interplay between what is the business case, right? I'm really curious if you went back to your company, what their business case was for going to agile development. And I would almost bet money that someone got convinced that we should just do this. And there was no business case. If there was a business case, I bet you could blow on it and it would fall over and had a ton of assumptions in it, right? So people are either predisposed for the idea or against it. If they're against it, they can say, show me a business case and then criticize it because they don't want to do it, right? So we've got to do education and work. I do think that at the what I do every day level, a lot of people don't even know what I do every day. So I can just do it and then show success is just one strategy. So I expect that what actually happened was something in there, and I'm wondering if Jean-Paul has any response to my commentary, to my question.
I think one of the differences between changing the way we test and introducing Agile is that Agile is a change for the whole software development process, which changing the way we test might also be, but is not recognized as such. And it could also be that maybe some managers have more power in bringing about change than others, and my experience that if it's directly involved with architecture and software development, that's more of a gray area for the general management. So they tend more to believe what those kind of managers or experts say than when you're talking about testing, because general management thinks that they know what testing is and have an idea about it. And often say, oh, yeah, like 15 years ago, I was a tester when I first started in IT. And then I think, well, okay, so you know everything that I don't like about testing and think that it should be that way. So I don't know. Maybe that's one of the reasons that Agile has more buy-in than changing the way to test.
Okay, I have a new yellow card on this thread in an already shown card, yellow card. I want to give you the opportunity to ask a question on this thread, so 2 yellow cards, and then I have to flip over to the 2 greens which are still left over because we have 10 minutes of time. So, okay, 168.
Hi, I'm Kimberly.
Hi.
I'm actually a test manager. I've been hands-on tester and built my quality team from scratch. And I hear a lot in these conferences where we argue about business cases or the value or, hey, we're going to do exploratory testing. And what I've read about context-driven testing is that part of this is critical thinking. Part of this is what do I need to do in the context of my organization to ensure that I'm providing value, insight, transparency into the product. If I'm in a regulated environment, I'm probably going to have more documentation. And I think that we tend to forget sometimes, I even tried it myself, we might do something that's very exploratory and ad hoc and say, well, I've got product coverage, and then I don't necessarily know what I've done, or maybe I can't communicate it up. And so when I hear, well, what's the business case? I usually think, what is the quality of the product based on time to market for what ultimately the organization needs to do? And that is incredibly important for me to understand and for me to provide information to my company, to leadership. And maybe you do it with a test report that's different than I do, but at the end of the day, I think we're all sort of saying the same thing sometimes and just saying it slightly differently. I don't really have a question. I guess it's more of just I
have an answer
comment.
Anyway. I agree. For the large part, testing should add value, and maybe value is more easily measured if you have a real end product. Where I work, we test a whole lot of stuff that actually is not a end product, but is something we have to do. Some regulator comes up with a new Basel Accord, and or some US government comes up with something that if we don't do that, they will fine us for $1 billion. We just have to comply. And we write software to do that, because if you have billions of transactions going on a daily, well, maybe not daily, but on a monthly basis, you can't keep track. So you need software to do that for you. So a lot of the software that we deliver is actually just helping the business process, but nobody really knows what the business process is, because it's all new, and well, they do know what the process is, but what the results should be, so they don't know how to value it. As long as the regulator is happy, as long as our audit group is happy, everybody seems to be happy.
But that sounds like a business case, I'm just going to say.
Yeah. It's kind of a business case, but it's a business case after the fact. And that's, to sell it in advance, that's a bit difficult.
Hi, my name is Håkan. I'm working as the managing director for testing services. And I'm always going into discussions about business cases. And I would actually say that you can find business case for everything, really. I mean, it's a value of pros and cons. So there is a business case for maybe not taking the car to the mailbox or looking through the windshield, I would say, because you can quite easily find more pros than cons, and the value of those pros outweigh the cons. So I would say that if we are failing with convincing organizations to change to context-driven testing, I would say it's because we are not putting enough weight on the pros in regards to the cons when it comes to value. And I would say that it's not easy, but I would say it's possible, absolutely. So we need to take a look in the mirror as well and see what we can do in order to increase the weight of the pros side.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Okay. Sorry, Ben, I have to close the thread. I have 2 green cards from one of you. Yeah?
Thank you. Hi, I'm actually right now with a very small company. The development team is actually less
Can you speak up a bit?
I'm with a very small company right now. The development team is actually less than 50, but not too long ago I was with a large bank doing testing. And the reaction from management at lower levels was, we're just doing whatever we're told to do from the upper levels. But my question was there anything that you did in the list of things that you presented that provoked a backlash that you maybe think you should not have done, maybe pitfalls for the rest of us to avoid? As in, we tried to promote it that way, we thought we were doing a good thing or presenting a good case, but it didn't go the way you thought it would.
Did anything I do or we did provoke a backlash? On a personal level, I have experienced a backlash that we have 5 business lines, and one of the directors of the business line will always be in one of the lateral meetings. And that particular director didn't really see eye to eye with me on this subject, so that was probably the reason that I didn't want to go back even after changing my business line, because you are representing all the testers there, and I felt that I would like to do that, not at the cost of the people that were already for that business line there, although I was asked to replace one of them, and I said, well, let's not do that, because the president of the lateral, which is the director of a business line, we don't really agree, and and it would be more cumbersome to mend that relationship and get ahead than have them do the stuff and just talk to me in the business line and it's themselves. So that was on a personal level, and that had really to do with our vision on testing to the better extent. And on the whole, I don't really think that there was a backlash, but there was a downgrade of importance. This is all very nice that you're doing and what you're changing, but everything is changing around us. And this is really affecting how many people there are going to work in the future. We're currently merging Rabobank Netherlands and Rabobank International, so we're kind of now merging with the larger group of outsourced companies who have also hundreds of testers working in head office. So people are kind of, okay, what does that mean for me? What about my job security? Because at Rabobank Netherlands, they are going to sack 10%, which is a lot. And they keep telling us that, the merger will not have any effect. So people are now more interested in complying than in change. Even if on a low level and not inside of management, they still do practice what they have learned because they know it's more effective. But they're not that outspoken anymore. They're not pursuing change. A few exceptions, like myself, aside.
Okay, last question, 168.
Hi. I work for a company probably in a similar industry to you, similar size, going through a similar transition right now from waterfall to agile, starting to adopt certain context-driven principles. Some of the same. So I empathize a lot with what you're just saying. And part of the answer to my question, I suspect, is going to be business case, and we've already discussed this, but I'm going to ask anyway. So one of the things you mentioned in your presentation was, talking to management about context-driven testing, and I haven't been in a situation yet where, when talking to management, it's come down to give me a business case. It's been more a case of, well, what is that? More about education on, exploratory testing. I've never heard of those types of things, so I haven't been asked so much yet on justifying why they'd want to change. But I kind of interested in understanding what it was you talked to management about. What was their concerns? How did you put that across? Was it just about a business case? Was it about answering about things like, how do we do traceability? How do we maintain that for our auditing and those types of things? So
I think there's a yes on all levels, but I will explain. I think on a low level, within the project, there's concern of meeting the audit level, because all our projects get audited at least once per year, or most of them actually twice per year. That means that if I change the way I test or report my tests, there's an immediate concern, because I'm not doing what I was used to be doing. So how will audit kind of respond? By now, I personally know that not all auditors are like vultures circling around to find stuff that is wrong. If you're honest enough on why you do stuff, what the impact was, and what was done with it, that's basically what they want to know. So they actually, well, some maybe still, but they actually don't really care if I write one test case or 100 or 1,000 or none at all. They actually want to know what I did and how that relates to everything else. So the traceability part is very important. The format, not so much. Stepping one level up, the line managers who are responsible for all the individual professions, that's a bit of a different story, because the test team managers, they buy in because it's what they promote. It's what the policy promotes. The development manager sees benefits because his developers complain less and find it more agreeable to change to Agile with these kind of testers. The business analysts, however, and that was a kind of a surprise when we changed to Agile, business analysts don't like it at all. They kind of feel threatened that we are on their turf for some reason. And we actually aren't, but we're just asking a lot of questions to them and to the business and our customers and everything, everybody basically. And some of them feel threatened that they have lost some authority because they were the ones who spoke to the customers to get to know the business requirements. And I don't want to get the business requirements, I just want to have answers to questions I have about the business requirements, basically. And that might actually enhance them, so business analysts have to do something with it, but it's not my intent. I just want to know more about the product and more about how to test it. But then the level above that, they don't really, most of the time you have to explain to them what context-driven testing means, because they have some vague understanding of what testing is, and it's roughly based on having a TMap and ISTQB for 30 years. So if you're doing something else, you have to explain why that also works. And going still one level higher, they might even lack that understanding, and then they kind of want to know what are the results, what are the benefits, and preferably in cash. That you have time benefits is something, and the cash benefits I cannot explain. I could probably do that with my project manager, explaining that the project was a month shorter, but then I would have to have him or her aboard to do that, and a lot of the times I didn't think of that in advance, and a lot of times they don't like to do that discussion, because for them it's also it's nicer for them to score points on having a shorter project period than having to share the glory, for some. So the higher up you go, the less interested actually they seem to be. So the type of convincing needs to change. Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you. That concludes this session. Jean-Paul, thank you very much.